Tonight's special guest is Michael Laws. Michael is best known as a Member of Parliament, the Mayor of Wanganui, and the mid-morning Talkback host on Radio Live. Never far from controversy, Michael is a champion for free speech and saying it like it is. Tonight, he is on The Beat Goes On saying it like it is. We welcome Michael Laws as our special guest on The Beat Goes On. Michael Laws, welcome to The Beat Goes On.
Very good to be here.
We're so honoured.
Yes. No, it's fantastic to be here. As I said, I surfed through and I found the show and I've
What on earth is this show called The Beat Goes On?
It is. That's exactly my reaction. And then it was something that I guess, it had an affinity to my childhood and my adolescence.
It's a show for baby boomers, and we're proud to announce today to the whole of New Zealand that you are in fact a baby boomer.
Yeah, I just sneak in, don't I?
Yeah. Well, you were born in a wonderful place called Wairua?
Wairua, yeah.
Or Wairoa, sorry,
Yeah.
I got that wrong. In 1957, which is, you're well in actually with the baby boomers, because in England, it's 1960 is the cutoff date, and 1964 in America. So,
okay.
So tell me about that day in 1957.
I remember it well.
Let's start right at the beginning.
So what the hell is this? What's going on? Who is this woman? My father was a school teacher.
Yes.
And it was his first, after Mum and Dad got married, and it was his first teaching section. In those days you did country service. And so they ended up in northern Hawke's Bay, Wairoa, which is about, an hour and a half north of Napier, which was the family home of both Mum and Dad. And then my sister Diane was born in Napier, in the Napier maternity. And then my parents, my father got a second teaching job, Wanganui, and we moved to a state house in Harper Street in Wanganui, where my youngest sister was born. So Mum had 3 children, 4 and under, and Dad cycled to school every day to do his job as a school teacher.
Now I wonder if anybody said that day your father and Mum and Dad and everybody arrived in Wanganui, that they pointed out and they said, see that little boy along there? He's going to one day be the Mayor of Wanganui. Do you think anybody would have said that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was really interesting. Harper Street was, Decile 1? We didn't know it. We were conscious that we didn't have a lot of money, and I mean, people didn't have televisions, didn't even have cars, but everyone had a job, and that was the key sort of social glue that kept all the communities together. Was that it didn't matter whether you worked at the freezing works, on the wharf as a school teacher. Everyone left in the morning, came home at night, So there was a social cohesiveness that just doesn't exist today because everybody had a job.
Now, you're growing up in Wanganui. Did you, you would look out and you'd say, this could be better. It could be better. Or... I
don't know if you think that. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that you've got that altruism flowing through your veins. I'm not entirely...
Things could be better, and why?
Well, yeah, but I think you actually, first of all, think, I should be in charge. I think that thought comes first, Who are these idiots? Yeah. I could do better than that. Yeah. And then I think the altruism of, what would I do once I got there? But I think politicians are born, not made.
I think so too, yes.
Yeah.
Down there in Wellington there was 120 other Michael Laws, weren't they? All jockeying for position about how things should be. So when you look back on it now, is it worth going into politics? What did you learn?
I think the thing that I learnt most, without question, was that I didn't know anything. And I was actually I knew academically and policy, I knew intellectually and knowledge-wise I could easily compete with anything in Wellington. The thing that civilised and made me normal, if you like, was dealing with constituents. When you've got people who are twice your age in all sorts of bother, and you are literally the last port of call before they hit the wall. And seeing that constant diet of people every time that you were having a constituency clinic, and that was twice a week, that's what made me knowledgeable and aware and mature. It wasn't Wellington. In fact, if anything, I used to argue that Wellington, and I still argue it, makes a lot of policy mistakes because it forgets the people that you go back to represent. And the advent of list MPs has made that disassociation, I think, greater. because they don't get civilised on a weekly basis by ordinary people going through ordinary things and bringing their problems to them.
How satisfying was it to be able to help people?
Enormously. But it civilises you too. It makes you human, and then it makes you aware that when you go to Wellington, these are the situations that real people are confronting. And as I said, I'm not convinced that list MPs have a clue if they don't have that sort of weekly centre. Yeah.
Reality check.
That's right.
Yeah, reality check. But of course, when we look back at it now, it was a battleground to make the perfect radio talkback host, wasn't it?
I actually think my combativeness is it. My problem is, and if I can be so free and bold about myself, it is I don't like people telling me what to do, so that's the first problem I've got. It's an inherent feature and flaw. And the second thing is I don't understand why people are so prissy about things that seem to me to be black and white. And we are overly sensitive. And frankly, we're also overly sensitive to people who are easily offended. And I get annoyed by those people. They say, oh, you've offended me. And I go, well, either leave the room or toughen up, you know, because this is a reality. And if you don't like me confronting you with reality...
Well, that is the difference from 1957 to today. You've got a beautiful case where you were sent a letter written in Maori asking you not to change the letter H in Wanganui. And then they accused you when you wrote back and said these magic words, I think that you should be spending your time writing to me in Maori, talking about child abuse in Maoridom and, of course, the murders that carry on. And then you were accused of bullying.
That's right.
Now, they bring out this wonderful word called bullying.
Yeah.
Anything they're not happy with, you're a bully.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I didn't take it seriously. I mean, the Liberals do. And we've got far too many Liberals who are prepared to make excuses. The last one, as a corollary of that, I've just written my column about it for Sunday, is the school lunches issue. You know, I mean, if you're sending your child to the school without lunch, you're a child abuser. You're not poor.
Yeah.
You know, your child isn't living in poverty. Your child's living with a piss poor parent. And really, you shouldn't be a parent if your priority of spending is my child's going hungry. You know, that should be the last thing. So and people will say, oh, I'm offended by the fact that you can say that I'm a bad parent. No, you are. And it's time that we said these things.
Then everybody has to leap in to defend them, you see. They have to be seen to be politically correct.
Well, the classic, I think, was a primary school principal who, when confronted with the reality of a TV3 investigation this week into his children's lunches, or lack of, said, are you shocked? Oh, yes, I'm shocked, but you know the reason, don't you? And of course the interviewer said, oh, what is that? The minimum wage is so low. And you're going, you stupid, dumb, ignorant man. And the problem was, he was a white Liberal in charge of the school, but all his kids were brown. 60% were Maori, 38% were Pacific Island.
And he felt as though he had to
So he had to offer an excuse, you know, rather than confront the parents and say, is there something wrong with you? You don't bring your kids to school like this.
When you said that, in your mind, you were telling the truth. But to tell the truth today is a no-no.
I've been on the issue of child abuse in this country and child deaths and the over-representation of Maori amongst those stats for 7 or 8 years. It's really interesting that Paula Bennett, Minister of Social Development, last week, 2 weeks ago, gave a speech saying exactly that. And then quoting, you know, the horrendous statistics and putting the responsibility back on Tautokoro, the sort of Northern Tribal Authority, to deal and to work with her, which they've agreed to do, which is great. So I think that sometimes I have to say, and I don't mean that I'm particularly prescient, but sometimes I'm just getting there first. Yeah. And you're just literally waiting for people to finally get there as well. Another incident was the disability at the Hellberg Awards. I got into massive trouble over that 2 years ago. It might have been a year ago. People were absolutely incensed over the fact that I suggested it was ludicrous for somebody from a disability sport to be competing against a Richie McCaw or a Daniel Carter for Sportsman of the Year. Wow, that was disgusting. How could you possibly say that? Yeah, but a year later I noticed the Hellberg Awards said, guess what? done what it should have done in the first place. It had its own separate disability award, which
Makes
was the
sense,
proper way
doesn't
to do
it?
it.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think people like to be offended.
I agree. Now, to end off, Radio Live. There you are, Monday to Friday, 9 to 12. You enjoy the job?
I view it more as sometimes now, not just as a discussion, but as an entertainment. After all, nobody wants to be bored. I mean, nobody wants the show to be bored, do they? So they're all waiting. There's a quirkiness, there's an entertainment factor, a character, a charisma, if you like, that every broadcaster and host such as yourself needs to bring, and obviously you do too. So.
But you do use some wonderful techniques. Like I love the one. I mean, I was listening when you referred to certain groups in our society as ferals.
Yes, and
it sort of stirs the pot, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I think it's a very accurate description. I might add. They are clearly not human. They are humanoid, but not really human. And I've long argued that humankind's evolving into two kinds of people. Good and decent people, and the ferals.
And the ferals.
And I'll tell you what, we're giving the ferals way too much rope. And letting them raise children and letting them even breed, dear Lord. So guess what? We get more ferals. And I think we need to confront those realities, that there's a whole group of antisocials out there. I call them the ferals because they're half wild. But that we don't want to do anything about. And then we wonder why we're filling our prisons, our mental institutions, why there's $5 billion a year spent on social welfare, why our schools have got a quarter of the population failing. It's really, really simple. The wrong people are having children. And as long as that continues, we'll continue to have these problems.
There is a good response to that? Do you think that the people...
Well, I'm sort of talking to the converted in a sort of way. I mean, sickly white liberals are not going to be switching on Radio Live and say, I must listen to Michael today. Gosh, he's got some interesting things to say. I secretly believe that many actually switch on just to be offended. I need to get my blood pressure up, so I'll go and switch on Radio Live. Yeah, but at the end of the day, again, if you take part in the discussion, then eventually you start to shape and mould opinions, and people start to say, yeah, I think you're right, and then that permeates through the political process, and then finally it reaches. And I think on issues like child abuse, social welfare reform, and things like that, you might well argue Talkback Radio has had a considerable influence over the last 10 to 20 years in evolving policy.
Just before we go, Michael, I'd say that we're both parallel. We've grown up in New Zealand, parallel lives. But 1981, there was a game in Hamilton, and the Springboks were playing, and then a whole group of spectators flooded onto the field. And I remember being absolutely furious. But today, I've changed my opinion about that. Now I sort of feel that maybe I was wrong. Maybe the Springbok protesters were right. Have you changed at all on that one?
No, no. I'm a great believer that you must allow freedom of expression, and that this is why I fight very strongly publicly whenever Hone Harawira says something that people want to censure him for. I say no. You must allow.
He's got the right to say it.
Exactly. You must allow people to have their rights. So whilst I'm a strong supporter of those who protest against the tour, and my family were involved in it, some of my family, some of my best friends, my girlfriend at the time, they also equally have to allow me my chance to say, no, I have a different view. And I'd also go so far as to say this, and it needs to be said, you look at modern South Africa and you tell me that's an improvement. It ain't. And the reality is that South Africa in 2012 is a disaster. And it's every bit as unequal, as unjust, as corrupt as it ever was under Botha and the white regime there. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that discrimination on the basis of race is right. What I'm saying, though, is that when you do replace it, it might be an idea to have a better alternative.
It is interesting that there was a Sharpsville massacre in 1960, and over the last month we've had another massacre, but not the same outcry as the 1961?
No. I sometimes think that when it comes to racism in the world, racism is very much worse if practiced by a white man upon a black, which of course is wrong. It's wrong whichever race, ethnicity or culture is perpetrating it.
Well, Michael, it's all these wonderful ideas you're talking about now that make your session on Radio Live so popular. So, Michael, thanks for coming in today.
It's a pleasure. Seriously, a pleasure.
And we'll see you again in the future.
Of course.